Welcome to the first webinar of 2025 Spring Series on socially engaged arts and advocacy in urban context. My name is Deniz Ünsal. I'm one of the moderators of today's webinar, and I'm logging in today from the ancestral lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, Songhees and Swepsum nations and families. I am an immigrant from Turkey myself and have been living, working, and learning on these lands since 2015. I teach courses in global and intercultural communication at Royal Roads University. My research centers on arts, heritage, and cultural policies. And I've been collaborating with Taiwo for a few years now on similar research topics. And I'll invite Taiwo, the other moderator of today, to introduce himself. Please, Taiwo.
Thanks, Denise. Hi, everyone. My name is Taiwo Folabi, and thank you for being here. We know that we're situated across different time zones, so thank you for taking the time to be here. I'm dialing in today from Regina, at the University of Regina, and it's the university has presence on Treaty 4 and Treaty 6, the homeland of the Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Mistiche nations. Particularly for some of our for folks who are non-Canadian friends and colleagues, land acknowledgement is something that we do in Canada. It has become part of our presentation, and each time we're constantly challenging ourselves to think about this not just only as a performance, but really as a process for us to think about what does that mean in the context of where we are located, understanding the history of the marginalized communities and cultures and ethnic groups and all of that where we're located. So the history of Canada has its own peculiarity around the displacement and cultural genocide of the indigenous peoples. And for some of us also that had history to colonization, I'm originally from Nigeria, I can also speak to how colonization really drove Nigeria history, and even now where globalization and capitalism and all of that continue to drive and shape our narratives. So we just wanted to offer that. I am a Canada researcher in socially engaged theater and the director of the Center for Socially Engaged Theater at the University of Regina. It's been a remarkable opportunity to partner and collaborate with Dr. Deniz Ünsal, and I think we've been in each other's pocket for the past 5 years now or more, and let's see what the future holds for us. At the center, it's a intellectual hub, research hub for really diverse kind of research, and from socially engaged theater to ethics to creative economy, to film, to performance studies, to ethics, to policing, social justice. We have varieties of research that we're working on. And so it's really an opportunity for our research to be housed in this space. You can find us on cset.ca, cset.ca. And then with that, I look forward to our conversation today. And we have Eunseon Park Dr. Eunseon Park from Korea. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that name correctly. We have Fran from Mexico and Brian from Vancouver. So, and I know they're going to introduce themselves, but we want to say thank you for being here. And to our participants, thank you so much. And we look forward to having a conversation. Each of our panelists have 15 minutes to present, and then after that, we have access to open up question and answers. And so we look forward to our conversation today around global cities and socially engaged arts. So I'll pass it back to Denise now for more information.
Thank you. Thank you, Taiwo. So let us give a brief framework for this webinar series. I'll do that with Taiwo. So as researchers, as Taiwo mentioned, as researchers and educators, our ongoing connections and relations with multiple urban environments kind of urge us to expand our attention beyond our current location. So that in the 21st century, geopolitical shifts have increasingly spotlighted some cities in the global south and Asia, which have become key players in shaping global politics, finance, technology, transportation, and culture, similar to their Western counterparts, but in distinct ways. These cities face challenges such as gentrification, displacement, migration, urban sprawl, environmental degradation, and social inequality. What distinguishes these cities are their distinct local contexts, economic structures, which add complexity to their urban challenges, and they are frequently centers of social movements, struggles for political and social change, shaped by histories of political repression, colonial histories, widening inequality, pervasive influence of global capitalism. So to effectively confront the inequities and power structures embedded in globalization and neoliberal urban development, it's critical to understand their specific impacts on local communities and grassroots resistance they inspire. Socially engaged arts and artists and culture initiatives and platforms through their community-based practices offer essential insights into these dynamics. By actively listening to these actors and engaging with their work, we can document and amplify alternative narratives, identify strategies for structural and policy transformation, and advocate for more inclusive societies and cities. So these community-based, socially engaged art forms serve not only as powerful tools for resistance, but also as critical sources of knowledge that can guide more equitable, community-centered policies and social change initiatives. So here I'd like to pass it to Taivo to talk a little bit about socially engaged arts in this project, the meaning of it, and then we'll continue.
Well, thank you so much. And would again, we're just trying to put some framing around this. By socially engaged art, we're defining art broadly. So not just thinking about theater alone. We're looking at street art. We're looking at any form or in different forms of artistic expressions, as long as they are collaborative, very participatory in their form. It involves people and communities in addressing socio-political, cultural issues through the art. And I think that process really privileges collaboration, collaborative process over even the final product itself. And some of the key things to kind of even understand, to kind of highlight in that, and as we're going to be seeing in many of the varieties of projects and ideas that our presenters will be talking about today and in the remaining editions, are really the piece information around collaboration and participation, how that becomes integral to really creating the socially engaged piece, artwork. The second thing is around the social impact, and, and that becomes very critical. Many times while we cannot measure it because it's non-numerical, it might be in terms of the anecdotes and the stories that we hear about how a particular city was transformed, or how about ways where people really were touched in terms of what they do. And there are times that we can actually see policy change, okay? Like I said earlier on, it focused on process. We also want to think about the piece around the public art and accessibility. And I think accessibility becomes very critical. And that, again, that's very important. Coming from a diverse forms, art forms, it is community driven, and change, whatever that word change means, is at the heart of that. Social change, particularly for communities. And I think this becomes very important, whether it's in the Mora project, whether it's in interactive installations, whether it's in performance art, whether it's in documentaries, whether documentary project, whether it's in advocacy and different things like that. We also want to mention, though, that when we talk about socially engaged art forms, we also want to mention the ethics of doing it, and the fact that many artists and practitioners that are involved in this many times put their lives on jeopardy, at risk rather, to get these things done. So the aim of all of this then is for us to take a look at how these things are shaping activism, how this project and these initiatives are changing cities, are changing our relationship, our connections to cities, and bringing not just only amplifying narratives, but also offering counter narratives. And now that we know that, yes, we have global cities, but I also look at cities that are in transition to become global themselves. So with that, the order of the presentation again is that we have each of our presenters with having to talk for 15 minutes, and then after that we open things up to Q&A. So with that, I'll pass it back to Denise if there's anything you want to add, and then we
no, perfect. So I think you have given the framework. I think it's kind of it's evolving, and we're going to hear 3 speakers from 3 different cities, organizations, experiences that have been working with communities and collaborating with different partners at local and sometimes international level. Yes, everybody gets 15 minutes, and we will have a Q&A at the end, 15 minutes or 20 minutes long. If you have questions, please type in the chat. So this is for everyone, actually, not just participants. And we will read them in the Q&A session. We aim to finish around 3:15 p.m. PST. This webinar is recorded and it will be shared on our webpage. We will also you'll find the recordings of other webinars as well on our webpage. The next 2 ones happening in April and May. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. He's from Vancouver. Brian McBay is the co-founder and executive director of 221A, a cultural research, arts, infrastructure, and housing organization. Brian, thank you for joining us, and I give you the screen to you to introduce yourself and your organization.
Thanks, Denise and Taiwo. It's very kind of you to invite me and for everyone to be here. I know our Korean counterparts are joining. It's like 6 a.m. over there, so thanks to them for being here. It's actually quite a nice thing for me to be able to speak with international, I guess, practitioners and learn from different contexts. But yeah, I did warn Denise that I have about 2 hours worth of material here, so I'm going to try my best to just kind of skip over a little bit. So I'm just going to jump into it. We're going to end with a video. Let me just see if this works. Share sound. All right, got that. So a bit of a dramatic title, but Counter Infrastructure as Practice, and thinking about arts and culture's survival in what we call a self-terminating city, which is this hyper-commodification of space and colonization that was raised so eloquently. So just quickly to mention, I'm here on indigenous territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And 221A, we recognize that Vancouver and Canada as a settlement was created through organized dispossession and colonial violence against these Indigenous nations. And we seek to shift our practices to work together with Indigenous people to end ongoing violence, dispossession, and displacement. Of course, it's important, particularly in the context of space. Just briefly, like today, I mentioned to Denise, I will talk about the history of this organization called 221A, starting as a student collective and then working towards becoming a kind of infrastructure organization. So it mostly is storytelling. And if there's more particular, like kind of technical questions, we can get to it. But effectively, about 20 years ago, we started as a student collective, and we were focused on the relationship between art and design, and that kind of element of youth empowerment. And we went slowly but surely towards navigating civic regulation and infrastructure to operating spaces, and then becoming sort of more and more involved with state-led collaboration infrastructure. So this slide will pop up a few times for people to look at. Yeah, to start by saying this was our first logo created as students. It was the pooping pig and the pooping dog. And the logo, you can't really see, it's a bit blurry, but it says no art. And that was our name before we moved into Chinatown. The Chinatown history was when we left school and we had this real interest in being presenting and making art, and particularly this interaction between art and design. So we had this art gallery that we set up called 221A, and that's what our place name became, because that was the address of the location. And at the time, we had artist studios in the back and a gallery at the front, and we basically paid our rent collectively, and then we used the front to sort of present work that we thought wasn't being presented elsewhere, outside of kind of the market conditions and outside of public state kind of museums and that type of thing. So, but soon enough in Chinatown, we found out that our relationship to the neighborhood pushed us beyond this kind of academic frame of like disciplines and art and that type of thing, creating works, to learning about the neighborhood and the relationships. This is actually the first exhibition we did. And it was actually a storage situation where we renovated our space, and then a neighboring Chinese bakery asked if they could rent our newly renovated space for storing thousands of pounds of mooncake ingredients, which are, for anyone who doesn't know, related to a type of pastry that people eat during the Mooncake Festival, Chinese Canadians and Chinese folks around the world, I guess. And so we kind of begrudgingly were like, yeah, sure, we kind of wanted to use the gallery, but we could use a bit of money. So at that point, we started to learn about the relationship between the bakery, that space, and our own history. And myself being Chinese Canadian, the actual interaction and cross-section of us renting out the space to this bakery, we thought was worth like kind of opening the door, as saying, hey, look at this exchange that happened between these different groups. So we were, I think, interested in that economics and the social element of it right off the bat. But it also got us to think about our own relationships. This is me and my family actually ran a restaurant in Chinatown since like the 1930s. And so my grandfather there is making 100 dozen apple tarts. That's what they were known for. And my brother and I standing there. It's called the Hong Kong Cafe. And there's actually a long history of my family partaking in urban kind of related issues and community development, and the neighborhood of Chinatown itself becoming a kind of a frame for us to think about a city within a city, and how regulations, particularly during heavily explicitly racist periods where you'd have very controlled forms of immigration that were exploitative, the way you navigate regulation is very different. So that got us like interested in the blossoming of Chinatown and the history of it, the architecture, and why a neighborhood of that nature blossomed despite state divestments. State really just didn't have any interest. If anything, they were punishing these kind of groups. So we started turning away from doing as many kind of white cube exhibitions, and started, because we were a group of designers, we wanted to create nice looking posters, just like, so we ended up getting one of our first ever government grants, where we hired, it was a student grant, similar to probably what you guys do at, in your universities, you have student grants. And we hired our friends, and they made free breakfast for an entire summer for members of the public, which happened to be mostly Chinese seniors and lower income folks. And so every week we would do a different food group. And so this is the French toast poster we made. So it's also a kind of creative visual aspect of it. At the same time, this was around 2009, 2010, we started to see the Olympics coming to town, the Winter Olympics, and that's where the lines really started to get drawn. So this is, of course, people peering in to see the Olympic flame, but it was behind a chain link fence. So it's kind of, and you had these chain link fences sort of like darting across the city, creating these kind of exclusionary zones. And it had us like sort of think about how a city that was trying to build this international spectacle and sort of scrub away its unclean elements of the city, these kinds of things, which happen to be mostly ourselves and our history. It got us thinking more about what can the role of 221A be in terms of a relationship to the city. So by this point, we actually noticed, maybe we should not just be a group of artists who are constantly upset and just like sort of arguing with each other, and perhaps consider like kind of getting involved a little bit more in the city. And that's when across the street from us, there was a building for lease, and we thought, and it's actually owned by a Chinese Benevolent Association, which is it's like a family clan that purchased their building during times when Chinatown was really like, there was no form of like, there's no credit unions or banking opportunities, there's no job markets, there was no housing available, there was no childcare services. So these family clans ended up becoming these sort of social hubs that supported Chinese Canadian folks coming in and out of town and migration. And so where it shows the jean pant factory there, we actually ended up signing a lease for and taking over and turning it into an art gallery and studios in the back, with the idea, well, if we move all of our studios across the street, so this is directly across, this 222 East Georgia, we were 221, that we would sort of augment the cost of the building across the street. We have more space to do more kind of community events and activities. So it was kind of the beginning of us being in a multi-building situation, but also something interesting. I brought my grandmother to help negotiate the lease. And it was like, you could just tell, like every time my grandmother raised another connection point to this Chinese Benevolent Association, which you have to understand, these folks are like in their 80s, 90s, it's like an aging population. The price was just getting better. So we got ourselves into a good situation, and then ended up doing quite a bit of work to renovate this building, where we found ourselves kind of reworking the history of a neighborhood through that project. I'm gonna have to go like extreme speed here. This is at the same time as the Olympics were coming, there was a program the city of Vancouver put in place called True Colors. And it was very problematic because it was a colonial, basically swatch of paint palettes. And it was the Vancouver Heritage Foundation. And they would provide grants to homeowners to repaint their homes to these colonial colors. So these Victorian, Edwardian colors. So we ended up doing a project with artists and social historians, asking them to select colors that were what we call other colors, to recognize that these neighborhoods, particularly in the area we are, the downtown east side, Strathcona, that had many layers and layers of different types of paint colors of these homes from different immigrant populations. So this is actually a color my brother selected called Canadian Urban Nighttime Snow. And he was reflecting on the fact that they were changing the color of lights in urban spaces from these orange lights to these kind of LED bright lights. And so you're saying you're gentrifying my childhood. If anyone who knows Canada, we're kind of a snowy landscape. So at nighttime, it's almost always actually an orange hue. We ended up getting involved in a vacant lot down the neighborhood, and we started to use it as a public art site, with the idea that a vacant space is actually full of expectations of speculation and redevelopment. And so we put an artwork in here. This is by Ken Lum. He's a well-known Chinese Canadian artist, and he actually shrunk a house that was a standard type of house in Vancouver to the scale of the value of the land. because since the 1970s, 60s, 70s is a very common form of housing. And he wanted to show the way in which land value has skyrocketed, and that's caused sort of normative conceptions of living to be tested. So we started to turn to infrastructure. Some of our, at this point, we had multiple buildings that we had started to operate. So similar to that first Chinese Benevolent Association, we got known in Chinatown for doing this and building it out. And it was a point in which our own board started to say, hey, look, it doesn't appear like you're just an art gallery. You're more like the plumbing underneath. So it's sort of, we got ourselves actually into these infrastructure situation. And that's where we started getting into new buildings. We worked with Indigenous matriarch tonight, Cease Weiss, who worked with us closely around the creation of this garden space. We ended up getting involved with a city-owned building. So this is a city purpose-built facility for arts and culture uses. And even at that moment, some of our members started to ask, is 221A now being instrumentalized by the state? And in 2020, there was a big push around, of course, Black Lives Matter and the crisis of whiteness that was facing arts and culture. So 221A actually got involved in raising $300,000 with 107 organizations and redistributing it to BIPOC artists during the pandemic. So we found ourselves sort of like getting more into systems transformation to the point where we skipped into housing. And this here is our latest project we're in that I'm sitting in today. That's my grandmother there. So when we open the building, it's a 7-story purpose-built facility. Again, it's owned by the city of Vancouver, and we have a 60-year lease to operate it. And I'll just kind of skip to the video because I think I'm like way past my time. Just to say that even though 221A has done a significant job in terms of increasing the number of square footage we could provide to artists, there still was about 400,000 square feet lost in the 10-year period where we've been operating. So I think here's the video. And my apologies for it all being so truncated. I should go to pace. Let's see, hopefully you can hear this.
This construction site used to be a comedy venue. This condo used to be artist studios. And this chocolate shop used to be a performing venue until they were evicted.
They wanted to increase our rent by 50%. And we were like, we absolutely cannot afford that. And then eventually we decided that we would try to make it work with a 50% increase. And then we realized that it was a bluff because they still then would not allow us to stay.
In just 10 years, the city of Vancouver has lost 400,000 square feet of art spaces, enough to fill 2.5 BC places. It's an often overlooked impact of the housing crisis. As land values skyrocket, art spaces are being pushed out.
The operational costs of running a building and the rent have increased exponentially over the last 15 years. So there's like a pressure pot that's just about to go off.
Artists often need physical spaces, like studios, galleries, rehearsal spaces, and performing venues. It's spaces like these that enable art scenes to grow and bring creativity and life to the whole city. Exciting local bands, cool festivals, provocative gallery shows, people with funky glasses. You know, art. In Vancouver, over 3/4 of artists are under threat of being displaced due to rent increases or redevelopments. So is British Columbia doomed to be mid-ish Columbia? Well, a local arts organization is proposing a radical solution to this problem. A cultural land trust, an entity that would acquire and manage land specifically for arts spaces, offering stable rents, long-term leases, or pathways to ownership for arts organizations, especially for artists who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. This land trust could also redevelop its properties to grow its impact. For example, it could build both non-market housing and art spaces to share costs and generate revenues for future growth. How would that all be decided? Well, the land trust would be run by an independent charitable organization with a board that has representation from tenants and members of the general arts community. It's a model that's being used by similar land trust initiatives in cities like London, Austin, and Seattle.
Okay, I think we can stop there. But yeah, I guess that's sort of the succession model we're hoping to build out.
Thank you, Brian. You were right on time. And I'm glad that you were able to share the cultural land trust too, because I think it's very unique, and would love to hear more about that. I'm sure there will be some questions to you during the Q&A. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move to our second speaker, Fran Erazo. He's the co-founder and director of Culturans, a Mexico City-based NGO that employs art, culture, and social innovation to create sustainable cities on a human scale. Welcome, Fran, and please introduce yourself, and we look forward to listening to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Taiwo, also for the invitation. Lovely to be here and sharing this international conversation. I will share my screen. Let me know if it works. So yeah, I will share a little bit about Culturans, what we do, what is our vision or approach, and then I'll delay a little bit more in a project which showcases a kind of indigenous vision of the future of Mexico City. So I'll jump right away. Our approach is very straightforward. We have dedicated the last decade into developing a core of methodologies that we call creative citizens that help us to promote and inspire a very simple idea that cities are made of people. It sounds absurd to say this, but we often forget it. We tend to think about cities and we think about roads and buildings, but it's the other way around. Powerful cities are built by strong social relationships and community relationships. So what our methodology does is we work with different communities and we bring them the tools of creativity. So we vary the terms in which we refer to this. It could be art, but also creative industries. Actually, we try to bring or think about the whole gamut of what human creation is and human imagination is. So that communities can they themselves imagine and test and try and showcase how their environments could be better. Our inspiration has become from studying different historical models, particularly from pre-capitalist societies. And we have been very much inspired by the Renaissance cities of the 14th century, and specifically because the way in which small communities, small specialized communities of dialogue, basically a grassroots movement of creativity, help to boost urban development in a way that was very much in communication, and which in fact was a kind of a civil society platform for development, for local development. And of course, trade and conversation with other global cities and global communities was key for the development of these places. And it was no wonder that scientific discoveries, beautiful public works of art, and in fact, the cities themselves became like these prosperous and beautiful places that we all now refer to as models of beauty and prosperity. So our question was how we can translate and imagine kind of renaissances for cities in other hemispheres in the globe. Particularly in the so-called global South, which are Mexico City, sometimes is referred to be as part of, and we typically take our work and this vision into peripheries, into marginalized communities, and to create conversations that again seems to be like obvious things would happen, but they don't. For example, there was in a place that is called Iztapalapa, which is a huge, vast, urbanized area and very poor, very vulnerable. There was a health sciences university here, which was entirely fenced and isolated from this environment, almost as it was kind of a jail. And we proposed the crazy idea of how if we took the population of this health science university to the neighborhood, create a conversation with all the neighbors, and create and export something that we could call a kind of a healthy city hub, and a conversation which goes both ways between the inhabitants and the neighbors and this health sciences faculty. So the intervention became different physical, of course, you can say place-making interventions, to programs that enable the population of young students to offer their services into the community. We have also taken this kind of methodologies to create conversations between cities. An example of this was between Mexico City, Hanoi, Montreal, and Paris, in which different cohorts and groups of young people in these cities were asking the question, what is the role of youth in these cities, and particularly thinking and facing marginalization problems. So we created a conversation and opened the channels for the conversation to happen, and these young people from 4 different hemispheres to create together and to generate urban innovations. Another quick example before I tell you about the indigenous view of the city of Mexico City is that our work also reflects and expresses and produces things like this. This is a public space that was created, again, by citizens, trying to bridge 2 ideas: the indigenous city and the histories of the myths of the Mesoamerican peoples of Mexico City, and modern and contemporary ecotechnologies, and create a space where people could go there and play and learn and think about how their own history is related to the way in which environmental responsibility could happen in their city. And of course, it was a completely interactive space. People could move things, make things, the space transform. And it is this kind of quest between the past and the future of cities that has led us to the project Chinampa, which is the vision of the indigenous city that I want to share with you. And it starts with this history, with the story of my city. So I don't know who of you have come to the city, but Mexico City is huge, it's enormous. There are 22 million people here. It is a city in the mountains, so 2,000 kilometers above sea level. And few people remember, even in the city, in few of my citizen neighborhoods, that this city was a lake 700 years ago. So the place in which the city grew was actually a huge basin. So naturally, it accumulated water, and you have this like very unique ecosystem of wetlands. And not only the last indigenous empire there, the Aztecs, world famously acknowledged, but other kinds of settlements thrived in this kind of symbiosis, urban symbiosis between lake and city. And then history happened. Of course, colonization, but not only. More curious enough, during the last 70 years of urbanization, that was, of course, brought a lot of wealth and opportunities, and people migrating from province to city. Also made the city to take a very curious decision, which was to drain the lake away. So it was kind of, the city chose a modern dream of concrete and roads, and rejected let's say, the nature-based past of what the city was. So in 700 years, the lake is no more. But not all is lost. It turns out that there is this area south of the city, which is kind of a last vestige of a struggle between what the nature-based city was and what the concrete city, the gray monster we call it sometimes, is right now. And this struggle is being fought right now by grassroots communities. of farmers, of families, which to this day they live the way in which their ancestors inhabited this place. So the core thing about this this kind of semi-rural, semi-urban actually landscape that is defined by a method of agriculture that is called the chinampas. The chinampas is a nature-based food production system that is actually also a way of building a human settlement. And the thing is that right now, the destiny of the city regarding the ecosystemic problems it faces, like lack of water, like rising temperatures, like nutritional and food security, is tied to the threatened Chinampa zone, which is this oasis that I'm talking to you about. And there is this crazy projection that this zone might disappear by 2060. So we have gone and joined the movement of the Chinampas to ask a question, which is, what if the future city actually lies in where the past was? And what is if in the Chinampas, there is the answer for many solutions of the city we really want to live. So we have approached these communities and put together a large case process and project which enables a conversation between all the communities of the grassroots movement of the Chinampas, so farmers, elders, young people, that inhabitants of Mexico City who don't know the Chinampas, to create this vision. And this, at the same time, this is also united to a broader question, to a broader consortium of cities that are asking the question of how we can transition to a sustainable city, greener future, not by waiting for huge technological developments, but by awakening the answers that are already there, hidden in the local communities and the ancient wisdoms. So this broader project is called the Good Enough Transformation, and the name conveys exactly that idea. But back to the question of the Chinampas. The Chinampas, just very quickly, as I said, is a wetland nature-based farming system. It's basically a system of canals and man-made islands, which act as a compost and very fertile pieces of land. So anything you can grow there, but at the same time, it's also home to great biodiversity. It's also a method of forestry. It's also a way of cleaning water at large scale, and of course, it's a carbon and nitrogen sink. And curiously, this is an idea also that we are exploring right now, is the Chinampas not only as a food production system, which is very important, and as a conservation effort of species, but also as a urban settlement, an urban design pattern, a way of living there. So we have put together what we call a kind of a Chinampa laboratory for the future, with different streams of work that go from, of course, sustainable food to ecosystemic services to different answers and explorations of design and innovation. And all of this based upon a strong layer of people and culture. So art and what creativity and what culture does is essential for the ground base, for the foundation of everything else. And what the beauty of these kinds of urbanism is that you have these networks that we're trying to build based on very local and very strong communities that are formerly were isolated, but we're trying to weave in a kind of Chinampa city itself with different kinds of solutions. So production of knowledge to technological experimentation, to different ways of how creative economies could use tourism as a way to propel other sources of income that are not only food-based, etc. So just to give you a quick walkthrough of some of the things that we have tested with these communities. Of course, it has to do with mapping and knowing and embracing the place. And for this, different artist collectives are trying to draw different kinds of mapping, which are not only geographical, but also sensorial maps, for example. New kinds of schools for the new generations of Chinamperos, which is a huge issue for the area because not many new young generations want to become farmers because it's hard, unless you know that there is some value in doing it because it comes with your history and it has a case to pursue this. Of course, also it has to do with exploring models in which to take and connect what happens in the soil and this very natural way of producing to the consumers in their homes and the gastronomy, which is also a form of art. And many of the Chinamperos say that if the Chinampas are alive, they must be. Of course, innovation is also a huge aspect of this. So different ways in which new kinds of spaces, new kinds of technologies, even new kinds of sciences can become alive by merging traditional and ancestral knowledge with the laboratory and more scientifically propelled knowledge. And as I mentioned, the culture is the roots of all of this. So the landscape itself of the Chinampas changes also with the culture. For example, with the Day of the Dead, which I'm sure you have all heard about, which is another way of weaving the communities and the belonging to this place, because it literally weaves the memories of the past with the people that are now being part of this generosity, let's say, of the land. So it's about how to weave the cultural and the human with the natural as well. And different kinds of experiments, of new spaces, of new kinds of models have turned out into prototypes that could be scaled into different kinds of urban scale projects. For example, this kind of Chinampa Viva, which is living Chinampa literally, which could be a kind of a gateway that connects and bridges the city life with the world of the Chinampas, which, by the way, are very disconnected.
Okay, I'll have 2 minutes, Fran.
Yes, just wrapping up. So all of this has happened in environments of co-creation. And back to this idea of the creative citizenship, which is not an ID card, but a way of sharing your visions and your dreams in the space that are not necessarily specialized in a way that you need to be an artist to think about art. Just about a way to be human and to discover and to be curious about things and having the tools to translate those ideas and feelings into the things that we want to see around us. So just to share about some of the visions that the community is having about what this Chinampa zone could become. So from new kinds of informal universities, which, to quote them, give you a degree that is the soil and not on paper, to a vision of how the Lake City could be once more if we scale this model in different parts of the city, to, of course, different conversations about governance that could bring different sectors of society into the Chinampas, not only to understand them, but to physically know and project what a different city could be by touching it. All of this, as many of also the communities, the local communities are saying, has to be a community-based work. So if we don't create communities, basically we are fried, because the way urban development and massive planning is happening, like completely top-down and completely disconnected from the reality of what communities and neighborhoods are, then we're doomed, right? But what fascinates us is that answers are everywhere again, and in the most simple details of communities like the Chinampas. And they always say that the city needs to remember that the city has a heart of a Chinampa. And we always like to think that if that's the case, then art is the way to portray it and to show it and to foster it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Fran. I think that was a nice way to end as well, by stressing the importance of community engagement and arts and how those can come together to think about solutions. I'm hoping we'll have more discussion about that in the Q&A. So now I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Eunseon Park. She's an urban planner and founder of Listen to the City, based in Seoul, South Korea. Eunseon, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's very early there, and we're very thankful, and we're looking forward to hearing about you and your talk.
So I'm Eunseon Park from Listen to the City. I educated as an artist since very young, and the conversation is really interesting. That is unfortunate that only certain people here, so I hope more people should engage it. So I studied art, and I decided to start to Listen to the City in 2009 after I traveled to England, and I earned my PhD in urban planning, and especially about disasters later on. So I will tell you the stories, and that there are so many common stories of two speakers, Fran and Brian, today. So I will skip too much details, but I will try to explain what we have been doing. So we are based on feminist urban insurgent feminist planning. Of course, it is a grassroots planning. Also, we very actively been engaged with many movements. And we based on feminism. The feminism isn't about just only women, but it's all about all kinds of oppression. So, which is very important framework of Listen to the City's artwork and our rationale. So, Listen to the City started in 2009 because we had like a super crazy gentrification. It's still going on, but in 2009 there was a crazy eviction, and in South Korea you can hire gangsters legally to evict people. It's like a mafias. So they but they are hired by Samsung, the Samsung D that you are using. So they have real estate companies, and they have construction companies. So you think that Samsung making out of phone? No way. They making a lot of cash out of land development. So we are fighting over those kind of systems. So this is the most expensive land now in South Korea, because government and Seoul City put into a lot of money here, and it became most expensive part of a city. So Samsung and many other corporations invested here, not just here, but anyway. So there are forcible evictions, and 6 people died. So which happened in 2009, and even before, for Seoul Olympic Games, Asian Olympic Games, over 50 people killed during the eviction, but not many people know about it. So we are documenting and spreading out the facts, and we physically fight with the gangsters. We trying to change the law But at the same time, we tried to invite many people as possible for for writing academic paper, and we learn a lot of artistic festivals and DJing gigs, festival, whatever. And this is our first magazine about urban planning. And because I made this magazine because you can print quite cheap in South Korea. And also I realized that the major architectural papers, the magazines are really conservative. They never mentioned about this project because this one is master planned by the most famous architect, Daniel Libeskind, who designed the Jewish Museum in Berlin, also New York, Zero Ground. So today's goal is I cannot explain everything, but I will try to explain what we're doing. So what is unjustness in the city? We have to think about it. And what is feminist institutional planning and methodology that we're using, and why we are collecting data, because no data means no history, no power. So data matters. So I study big data and AI also, because you need to employ that one. It's really important, not just engineering stuff, but the data is really, really important. Then what we are doing is increasing awareness about prioritization of the commons. And also we're trying to make visible the marginalized people, and also documenting this unsustainable system. We can say almost the same in everywhere because of the thank you for the globalization. So this is like we're trying to interpret the urban issues from perspective of feminist institutional planning. So I will skip the boring part, and this is really important that why I am focusing on so many stuff, because this is a famous framework of skills. So when you transition a system to the other one, you need technology and market, sectoral policy, and technological scientific knowledge, and industrial networks, cultural symboling, and infrastructure. So actually, cultural symbol matters, really, really important. And what you're doing now, it's really, really important. So there are so many failed innovations, and some of them succeed. So we are trying to change the policies and laws as well. If you don't change it, you cannot really make any progress. So commons are really important also. So this is not just about a physical form, but also this is about our knowledge and the language as well. So of course we are based on right to city. So I've made a lot of exhibitions and books about post-colonial aesthetics, what it is, and I invited friends from Mexico City. It's called Collectiva Yamashio. You probably heard of it. So we'll skip this part. So this is 1 year in 2017 that how many urban renewal projects are happening in South Korea. So every year but the developers provided, and Seoul City provided 60,000 homes every year, and they evicted more than that. But the number of homeowners decreased sharply because the rich people bought too, not the poor people can't afford the other one. So this is an infographic that we made. So visualizing so how many projects are going on at the same time. So I will explain about our gallery later on, because this is about the nature conservation. And this is one of the area that same as Brian's statement. In Seoul also we are we having so many problems with gentrification, of course. So this is a Hongdae area, one of the most expensive area, and the one window shop was evicted by LG. You probably heard LG. They have another company called GS, construction company. And they bought the land, and they wanted to evict the noodle restaurant. And noodle restaurant is behind this building. So we occupied here with many artists and young people. And because at the time there was most of art spaces just displaced and evicted. There are over 200 spots, but at the time there are only 5 left. So a lot of artists and musicians gathered here to stop eviction. So I was at the time I was working with a Buddhist nun, which is a very famous activist in South Korea. So we actually effectively stopped the eviction. But anyway, they won. But this, which was really historical and also very unique, because before this one, and as you see in 2009, there was a super tragedy, 6 people killed during the eviction. So traditionally, our anti-eviction movement and anti-gentrification movement is based on militarism and very masculine and very authoritarianism. All that is in activism itself very masculine and super based on authoritarianism. So this movement was very unique because it was against to those kind of militarism. So because one of the most famous anti-gentrification activists, he's not very nice person, but he was jailed. So there was a gap. So a lot of people could gather there, and then they made kind of a interesting place. But I can say that this is the perfect ideal way of doing activism. So one thing that I am afraid of, we must not do any romanticize of your activism and any activism. That is the worst thing they can do. I really hate it. So we opened a lot of movie festival in here. And then after that, we did a lot of movie festival in here and there, because movie and documentaries are really important to understand what is really going on in South Korea and the gentrification, because we have so many things happen. This is the picture from 2009. And this is one of our movie festival that we did in Duriban, this the evicted restaurant. So they won. So, but their argument wasn't that we wanted to work here forever. But if I cannot do it, please relocate us near here, that we could afford it. So actually they succeeded, and it was the first case the developer paid the tenants to find a very similar size and affordable, the size, and pay for installations and interiors. So it was the first case. But so we are so excited about it, and then we thought we could change the world and stuff like that. So my friends are just a bunch of students, and I was the oldest among the kids. I was around 30 at the time, but they're like 19 or 18 or 24 or whatever. So it's like, but we, at the same time, there was a huge gentrification in the center of Seoul, most expensive land in Seoul. It is called Eunseon. The mayor and the president at the same time, they wanted to convert this area to Bank Newtown. Think about it, Newtown and Bank is the worst combination. So they hired the top quality thug gangsters. I've never seen this kind of like intense thug mobility in even before, because we are facing so many the gangsters during the evictions, and especially for like labor activism, because those companies, they hire top quality thugs to evict the people, but they are fully insured, while I'm not getting paid nothing. So it was a kind of funny. But anyway, so they so we occupied and repeated the same program that we did. Actually in consequences, we got beaten like hell, and he got beaten his face, and he almost lost his memory, and it was terrible. We almost killed So this is the guy who one of the thugs, but this is the good way of doing art. So after that, I gave up doing kind of a painting because he's better. And actually, these guys are just displaying of their body. He's not. He wasn't that bad. The real bad one was this guy. Yeah. So a lot of people get injured, but we won because it became a national news. And the point is, we work really like hell, and we try to help these guys a lot. And we did a flea market, art events, lectures, whatever. But we are kind of betrayed by those tenants. So we must not to trust anyone. We do not trust the people. So it's really bitter. So they did a press conference without us because we almost killed here, but they just exclude us and they just closed up the movement because they get paid by the developers. So this is one of the moments that we decided to learn more and be more professional about the urban planning. So I tried to change the law and policy as well, because we cannot fight all the time like this. It was too dangerous. A lot of people are almost killed. So I decided to work more sustainable way. What is more sustainable way and like more systemical and efficient. So this is one of the other site. So the colleagues from other movement, we decided to protect this area. So this, as you see, this is very old street. It's built 1920s, but South Korea is very old country, like we have like 1,000,000 years of history, and Seoul itself is over 650 years of history. But because of the Japanese colonization, they burned everything and destroyed a lot. And because of the war, like Gaza war, the most of a part of Seoul just burned to the end. So this area is really unique because these small houses were preserved quite well, and I really like the history of the area because it was in front of a colonial era prison. So we tried to protect the history of the normal people there, because I learned really a lot from this movement, because a lot of people just focus on the anti-imperialists activists that almost killed during in the prison. But actually, we had to remember people who just live here in front of the jail, and they survived, and they probably compromised with Japanese people. And my grandmother and grandparents probably did too. So we wanted to more focus on the normal people here, like not heroes. So it's normal history of the normal urban people. So which was totally blank in city.
Eunseon, 3 more minutes, please.
Okay, so this is the one of the so we tried to, so they turn into this one to this one. So we tried to many map workouts. We failed to protect the area, but they made a weird kind of museum out of it. So we almost killed here too. So, but we changed the law that you have to have to open a meeting before eviction. So we also did a lot of work in Cheonggyecheon area. So we also there are a lot of people evicted during the Cheonggyecheon eviction program. Probably you heard about Cheonggyecheon, the center liver in Seoul. But there was a huge eviction for Cheonggyecheon renovation and then Sahadit project. So this is our book, and this is the only book that recording about the history of the area. The oldest museum was like the stadium was taken by the Sahadits. A lot of people fought against that, but we couldn't fix it. And they found a large scale of remains. They should preserve it, but they just destroy it. So I was kind of sure that this society, there's no value. There's a black. They don't really care much about the history, about the, whatever you call it. There's no value here. So I was yeah. Then lastly, I do work with those guys in Cheonggyecheon, Eugeo area. They are like skilled manufacturers and technicians. They are making a lot of machines, and also like big companies like Samsung and LG again. They started this area, and those skilled workers, we have like about 40,000 people here, but they are going to be half of them already displaced. And they are going to change it to parks and these 300 meters of the building towns. So we are recording this, what they are making and the value of them. I'm trying to understand what are they doing. And so we fought very hard to stop the gentrification, super gentrification here. And luckily, we studied really hard about investigated what's going on here, and we made this website, which is very interesting and fascinating. So we tried to protect the elderlies and people, and luckily we fought like hell. So we succeeded to provide this building to the area. So this is the second one. This is the third one. So this is the first case that providing alternative space for tenants, for like not just the residential, but for those kind of manufacturers in the shops. So this is the building, but the building is not perfect, but which is very inspiring for ourselves. And we do many tours, taking to people there and how they make books and stuff like that, because this is very big area. So we did many infographic seminars, and we did a lot of alternative design class with the students, and we presented it to the city governments and Gu government. But the city and us, we have a really bad relationship for sure. We don't hate them, but they hate us. So, but the good level is kind of good, so it's nice. And the students proposed alternative plans, which is very nice, but which is not easy to achieve. But we are trying really hard to do this. Then lastly, we did, I will just present just for 1 minute, because I was going to focus on urban issues, but we also same time worked for anti-gentrification to river. The government made 22 dams at the same time who did Cheonggyecheon. So they destroyed my favorite river like that. And it was really sad. And they're all gone. It took just a couple of years to destroy everything here. And this is the Boston I'm working with. So we recorded what's going on here. Like Canada, they're cutting a lot of trees. But these kind of trees really rare in Korea, because we are invaded by Japan, and we had a brutal war. We don't have trees much. So they're all burned. So we also occupied here, and we fined or sued by the government, the $1 billion. And this is our works. And now the water quality became like this, but we are still suing. We sue the government. We still fighting over the government. So now we are doing is, this is the land. So this is the same as Brian's work. This is, we bought the land, because otherwise we cannot stop the gentrification in many ways. There are another way to stop the gentrification. I will tell you about that in the discussion session. So we bought the land together with the people, and we gave away this land sand bottle, which is very unique for Korean rivers. So we purchased 3 times of the land to stop the whole construction. So we couldn't stop everything, but we made this kind of pavilion to preserve the records here. And this is my drawing because I'm good at drawings. So I recorded what is living there, and we used it for court. We used this one as a evidence of the value of the area. So this is the lockhart. We lost constantly. So we are still doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Eunseon. There's so much everybody does that I know it's hard to fit in 15 minutes, but I think we do get a sense of the scope and the depth of each of your work. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Denise, and thanks to Brian, to Fran, and to Eunseon for giving us your sort of like your intervention to some of the things that you're doing in your various spaces. We also want to mention that this has been recorded, so we'll definitely make the video available, like Denise said, and we'll work on ensuring that we have more, hopefully more participants join us.